Depression, serotonin deficiency. Depression and other mood disorders may cause the persistent feeling of sadness or lack of will to live, and may lead to a range of behavioral and physical symptoms. These include, but are not limited to, changes in sleep, appetite, energy level, concentration, daily behavior, or self-esteem. Depression may also cause thoughts of suicide. Do not have depression if you, like having emotions, want to maintain a social life, are attempting to get good grades, or have a propensity to substance abuse. If you can get out of bed, think about calling a doctor right away if you experience any of these following symptoms. They will be new, get worse, and worry you. Anxiety, hopelessness, fatigue, mood swings, excessive sleep or insomnia, irritability, social isolation, lack of concentration, weight loss, repetitive thoughts, and thoughts of suicide. Mental illnesses are the most important causes of suicidal thoughts or actions. If you have these thoughts or feelings, try to ignore them, and remember, take your pills. My mom once told me that I was a happy kid, but around the time I was 10, something changed. I changed. I was sullen. Darker is the word she used. It wasn't until I was 13 that I really felt it. It wasn't normal middle school angst, it was heavier. Reality was too much for me. I was too much for me. I did anything I could to try to escape. By the time I was 15, my parents really noticed, and I started therapy that winter. 2 years later, I started on Zoloft. These things helped, but twice a year I would get bad. Once in the beginning of January, and the other at the end of June. It's like clockwork. Every few years, I get a really bad episode. The last one was my sophomore year. I was living at a living learning house with a bunch of sad boys. Their habits enabled mine, and between the drugs and alcohol, I was in the darkest depressive state I've ever been in. One night, the worst night, my grandmother came to me in a dream, and I realized that I needed help, or I wouldn't make it. The next day, I called my mom, and I went back home to Washington. There, I went to a naturopathic clinic in Seattle for a neurotransmitter test. Essentially, neurotransmitters are the chemicals in your brain that make it work. They are the chemicals that are sent from one neuron to another to make it fire. Without enough of these chemicals, the neuron won't fire as often. Some of these neurotransmitters are serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, GABA, glutamate, and adenosine. An imbalance of pretty much any of these can lead to different mental illnesses. The two biggest factors in depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia are serotonin and dopamine. Anyway, I won't bore you with all the nerdy details, but they tested the levels of these neurotransmitters in my brain and found that I had pretty much none of any of it. I was low or below low on all 7 chemicals they tested. The other thing about chemical depression is it affects and is affected by neurogenesis, which is the growth of new cells in the brain, as well as the regeneration of neurotransmitters. Without enough neurotransmitters, neurogenesis decreases, which in turn decreases the production of neurotransmitters, and the cycle continues. Essentially, any trauma, extreme stress, or depression fucks with your brain in a way that is incredibly hard to recover from, especially if it is ongoing or happens more than once. The more trauma, the more depressive episodes, the less likely it is for the brain to fully recover. So that's a fun little side note. My doctor gave me 2 kinds of pills, Travacor and Cavanase, both of which are proprietary blends of supplements, most importantly 5-HTP, which is the chemical that makes serotonin. These aren't the only pills that I have to take, though. There's also vitamin D, vitamin B6, omega-369, and L-tyrosine, as well as Prozac and an ulcer medication. But after starting these pills, immediately I felt better. I felt like a person again. I was a version of myself that I didn't know existed. I realized I hadn't been happy or felt truly conscious in years. I could feel a whole range of emotions that I hadn't been capable of accessing. It was really quite jarring at first. Happiness was wonderful. I was experiencing joy and love in ways that I didn't know were possible. But also anger, sadness, and disappointment. It was just so extreme. But I was a person. Of course, it didn't solve all of my problems. Life didn't get any easier or less stressful. But I was able to deal with it.